When you feel stuck and like you're hitting the same invisible wall and you're not sure how to make your big goals and dreams a reality, you likely feel that you don't have what it takes. You are not alone. And believe it or not, everyone that you look up to and envy as a success has felt the exact same way. Our personal development is the key to our success, especially as an entrepreneur, a freelancer, a coach, a content creator, an investor, or speaker. Our personal development will limit and hold back our business development. Our personal development ceiling is our success ceiling. And you may have already felt that and seen that for yourself. And that's why investing in yourself is investing in your business. And I know I've hit so many ceilings and broken through them as I quit my job to become a full-time freelancer, educator, and designer. So I'm bringing you one of my best sources to help in this area. If you want a successful business while living a life true to yourself, you're in the right place. Welcome to Onthentic. Let's get started. Today we have a guest, and this is Faisal Ensaun. He is my certified high performance coach. He's the co-founder of the Coaching Mastery Community, where he helps teach other coaches how to hone in and further develop their abilities and practice their business. He's also the co-host of the Coach's Journey podcast, and he runs the Space Creators Community, where he holds weekly small group sessions. I'm in there, and they're fantastic. And he's overall just a remarkably intuitive and knowledgeable guide and coach. Since 2015, he's helped over 2,000 individuals in both one-on-one and group sessions, including students, stay-at-home moms, entrepreneurs, CEOs, and athletes, helping people just like you and me make your potential your reality by leveling up in business and life without compromising your joy, peace, health, and relationships now to get there. So thanks for joining me today, Faisal. I really appreciate your time, and I can't wait to see what we create today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And who was this person you were introducing?
It's you, I promise.
That sounds a little bit of too much for me.
So Faisal is actually a past client of mine. So I am very in tune with his business and his content and his copy. So that just came so effortlessly. And it was lengthy because he has just so much experience and he's so talented.
Thank you. I appreciate the kind words.
Yeah. So Faisal, today I was thinking that we could talk about vision to start with, and then we get 2 episodes with you, and the next one we'll talk about authenticity, but share a little bit about yourself and also why building a vision is so important for you and people like us.
Okay. So when you say share a little bit about myself, did you want me to, you already shared a little bit about my business.
Yeah, I think that what I would like is it hasn't always been like this. We don't always start with all of this experience. If you can kind of do the dotted line from the beginning to where I started off, I think that would really help people understand your personal journey as well.
Yes. Sorry, I forgot to close this window.
That's
keeps
okay.
Popping up. So for me, with most people who do this kind of work, for me, it started with my own struggles, and my own struggles being that, and I'll go to the beginning. As a young man, for me, this started off at a point where I came to the Western world from a completely different part of the world, from the Eastern world. I was born in Afghanistan, and I lived a big chunk of my life in Pakistan. And so 2 very different cultures from each other, some similarities, but then coming to Canada, Toronto region, as a 17-year-old teenager, just painting the picture, was, in the beginning, it was exciting. But as I jumped into this world, it was as if I was dropped into another planet with some alien life forms. It was still humans, but many of the things that I was taught to be true did not either apply here or weren't true here. And my assumption as a 17-year-old was that, this is true anywhere universally. but that wasn't the case. And just the kind of person that I was, the kind of mind that I had to make sense of things. And I had somehow put pieces together up until then to kind of somehow adapt to a world where I never felt comfortable to begin with. Mm-hmm. When I came here, I saw that most of the things that I was taught didn't apply, didn't work. It was just not working. Mm-hmm. And then the more I got into this culture, the more it challenged who I was, my identity. And the more I realized I needed to understand it, but I didn't have the tools to understand myself. I didn't have the tools to process a lot of the emotions. I didn't have the tools to communicate with others. I didn't know where to look or seek help. So that pushed me to the one direction that everybody gets pushed in that point, is to run away. And my running away, the way it looked like was, well, let me just go and party. Let me just go and find some friends, distractions, and let me just drink more, and for the sake of fun and entertainment. It was quite extreme. Let's put it this way: every kind of the substance you could think of, I was exposed to in the process, not for the sake of I'm trying to find a new experience, but literally for running away. And it didn't hit me until I was in a psychology class, my first psychology class, when our professor asked me, like, why do people drink? My perception was, well, fun. And then after everybody thinks, he just gave the answer to us, well, run away from their reality. Yeah. Like, what? That's not true. I don't run away from my reality. And then it at least sowed the seed of something is off here. And then it just kept pushing me as I kept going towards there. Obviously, physically, I was in a bad shape because I know, like, even though I worked out and stuff, but I was literally broken inside. And then emotionally, I was in a bad state because I didn't know how to express anything that was inside of me. In fact, I suppressed most of it. Came to a point, and I've shared this before, this story, is that when I had come out of multiple nights of partying, in this day, as I was coming out of a subway station, and I look around myself and I watched everybody, I felt weak, I felt disconnected. I come out of the subway station, I had to kneel down because I felt sick as well. And in that moment, I felt this huge surge of pain, and all sorts of thoughts went through my head. But the biggest thought was that my life was just passing me by. I wasn't experiencing my life. I was just watching my life pass by. And I felt this huge surge of physical and emotional pain throughout my body, and something I never experienced at this level. But what was really odd was the next moment, I felt this level of peace and joy that I had never experienced before, or at least anything that I could remember. In that moment, I felt it. But then I thought, with the mind that I had at the time, I thought I was going crazy. Like, why am I feeling good at this time? Nothing really happened in the sense that, oh, I had this big realization, I need to do this. And I naturally started making a lot of changes. It's like, oh, I need to stop. There was no like rationalization around it. I'm like I started getting interested in picking up books on psychology, history, philosophy, anything on spirituality, anything related to it. I got more and more interested in what are the root problems, because I realized up until that point nothing was working, and it wasn't even my thought process to really, oh, let me figure out what's not working in the sense, but it was more like a curiosity that happened. So within that process, over the next few years, I started learning more and more about myself, about how human beings work, about how society works, about how history works, about how thought processes work. And slowly but surely, I started going on this adventure, which is the inner adventure, to begin to learn who I was really versus what I was taught. And out of that came, it took a while, but what it helped me realize was that there was much more to who I was than what my thoughts were telling me, people around me were telling me, and even the experiences were communicating to me. And I got to a point where at some point I realized that that's it. This life is not for me. My life, I need to start designing it. I need to start creating it. What does that mean? How do I do that? Is that even possible? And when I began the journey, it was scary. What it looked like was I quit everything. Literally, was for me, it was cold turkey. Like, I'm leaving my engineering career. I'm leaving the life that I knew. I'm gonna figure out what feels aligned with me. And that started a huge healing process. I got coaching in the process. I got all sorts of supports. I started connecting with different people. And within that process, I realized that we do have the ability to design our life. We have the ability to create a completely different path forward. But more importantly, we have the ability to connect to an aspect of us that we kind of left behind. Mm-hmm. And in the words of another thinker, which I don't know who, but I've heard this a long time ago, that before the world got its hands on you, yes, who were you?
Yes.
And then I started connecting back to that side of myself. And what came out of it is the process of creating the kind of life that I wanted, the kind of, and that life has the positive and the negative in it. The kind of business that I wanted, the kind of future that I'm creating, the way that I wanted to serve people, connect with people, the way that I wanted to contribute. All that came from that process of self-discovery, and then which led to a life that's more intentional, that it's designed versus, oh, this is my fate. A life of purpose, a life of fulfillment. And it's so odd even for me to share this, because just a few years ago, I didn't think any of this would be possible. I thought I would just be on the journey of, like, I'll just learn, and I was really interested in learning, but I didn't think I could create anything because I thought too little of myself. So that's, I don't know if that communicates it, but
that does. And where did that shift take place, do you think, for you? Because I feel like, I mean, I've said this so often in my podcast that especially in our world, even in different cultures, you have this amazing experience of being able to see like 2 or 3 different worlds in cultures. And that prompted, I think, a lot of this kind of inner learning and awareness. But a lot of us who are in one culture, we are so ingrained in that culture that it's kind of like this upward struggle of just trying to climb out while the sand's like falling in on us. Because I feel, and I have said that I feel like we are raised to conform to survive within our society, within our teachings, all of these things. And then we later within business or this career structure, we're like competing to succeed. But where you said where you were a few years from now until this present moment, you didn't believe that possible. Where do you think these like kind of shifts took place?
Well, it wasn't one moment, I can tell you that. It was a combination of moments, but also more importantly, it was more an iterative process. Mm-hmm. So you have, and this is how, it's not like people believe in this one-day transformation. It doesn't happen like that. Even with my transformation, the story that I shared, it wasn't like when I was doing those things, I was aware of what I was doing. I wasn't conscious of anything. Like all I was the next step towards it. So for me, the next steps, what it looked like was, the first was I had to make a decision. And usually that's the part that's the hardest. It's not the doing part. The doing becomes, and it sounds cliched, the next steps get revealed itself as you make the decision. So I'll give you a story around this. I was in a coaching session with a client literally yesterday, and it was just the second session, and he's a coach. I know that he's afraid because I've been there, for one thing, and I understand enough about human behavior that I was trying, he's asking for my help to create an ideal coaching business where he could serve people based on their potential. Yet he wasn't stepping into that. He could see it clearly, but he didn't know where was the block in there. And in his mind, he thought that he needs a strategic approach moving forward. Strategy begins when we know what what the problem is and what we need to create solution, but he didn't even see the problem. And I knew that he didn't. And I knew that the kind of mind he had, a very analytical mind. And here's the problem with analytical minds. Analytical, the more strategic and analytical, the more power you have to think, the easier it is for your fears to hijack that side of you. So it's actually much harder to coach somebody like that than somebody who thinks in simple terms. That doesn't mean one person is smarter than the other. It's just a different way of thinking. So as I'm coaching, as I'm helping him walk through this by asking him deeper and deeper questions, like, what are you trying to do? And essentially goes to the vision. And the first session, I essentially mapped out his vision with him, and we can talk a little bit about what that looks like. And everything, like in his mind, everything makes sense. Oh, I have this step-by-step process to move forward. By the second session, I knew I had to talk about fears, but he wasn't willing to go there because as somebody who's thought about this stuff, who teaches this stuff, who has learned this stuff, he could not possibly be a victim of fear. And so I had to still go towards, like, give me the plan for your business. What are you trying to do here? We laid out a 1-year plan. So what do you see the challenge to be? He's like, well, there is no challenge, but I'm a little bit reserved. And this is what I heard, like, I'm reserved, and like, okay, I get that. So what are your next steps for? Well, right now I'm practicing with this other coach to do this, that, and the other. I'm like, how long have you been practicing? Like, well, in this, what I just started, it's great, but I just started this. But I'm like, what else have you done as a coach? Like, well, I've been part of this community for 2 years, been doing this, that, and the other. And he doesn't need any more practice. It was very clear, but he couldn't see it.
Yeah.
I'm like, so you say reserved, what I hear is I'm afraid. You say I have a strategic plan, what I hear is delay, fear. Like, these are our cover areas. So, and I asked him, like, you don't, like, first of all, I had the tendency, I made a mistake to push him to commit to something, but I see that he had huge resistance around. I'm like, okay, we don't need to do that. All I want you to acknowledge is that you're afraid. Can you do that? He hesitated. I'm like, I don't want you to take my word for it. I just want you to pay attention to your body, how you start to react when I ask you about what the next step is, how your body starts to move and how your voice gets different, and how that's resistance. Why do we have resistance to something? Because there's a part of us that stops us from making that decision. Now, as soon as you acknowledge, and we've all heard this, the truth will set you free. But you don't know what your truth is in that moment because you're calling it something other than what it is. You're calling yourself reserved. You're calling yourself strategic. None of those things are true. The only thing that's true is that you're afraid to jump on. And even if you don't jump, you just need to acknowledge that. I'm afraid, it's normal. When am I going to make that decision? And that's what it comes down to. I just had to make the decision to jump. And like another cliche, build the wings as I'm jumping. And so the next steps for me is, first, I was like, literally what it looked like. My wife and I, we sat down and were like, this life is not working. We're both miserable as hell. What if we took some time off? And I had done some work of researching around there. It was like, I didn't know I wanted to be a coach. I knew I wanted to work with people from some experiences of helping a couple of people. I knew it wasn't going to be in the engineering field. I had already tested it. I'm like, so how do we find out more? So I had to get out of my comfort zone, my little safety bubble, and get out there. What it looked like was we took 3.5 weeks, something like that, went off to the West Coast, California from Canada, and even took a cruise down to Mexico. And we went to a couple of seminars. One of the seminars was a spiritual seminar, which we got to meet a bunch of people. Interestingly, I didn't have my spiritual realization in the spiritual seminar. I had it at Experts Academy.
It's amazing how that happens though, when you're in a different environment, I get the ideas that cross over, the inspiration. So yeah.
Yeah, it's odd. The things you know how you create, like, well, I'm gonna sit here and meditate, become the spiritual, but you did never become a spiritual person from meditation. It happens in those odd moments when you're doing normal things. So I go there and I come across 47 people from 47 different countries wanting to contribute to the world in a way that connected to their heart. For the first time, it's like, oh shit, I'm not alone in this.
Yeah.
Up until now it was theory, but now I'm actually seeing people live, and I was conversing with them, I was talking to them, and I could not believe my eyes or hear. This was magical for me because I had been seeking that from childhood. I just found the kind of people I wanted to be around. That began the process of me, okay, if it's possible for them, if it's possible for him, for her, for that, why not me? And then slowly from those interactions, from the journey that came up afterwards, there were a lot of struggles in there. We could talk about that. That's why I call it more of an iterative process, but it starts with the decision is once you're out there, things will come up. And every step of the way, you're going to have to deal with that resistance around self-preservation. Yeah. So, and then this, one of the best ways Sadhguru talks about this a little bit, is that there are two sides to us. One is the self-preservation side. We all have it. It's the biological side of us that says to protect you, your family, your community. That's an important part of us when we need to keep the people and ourselves in our life safe. Then there's another side of us that's consistently wanting to expand. That's the curious side of us. That's the side of us that wants to take us towards wanting to know more about people, that wants to see connection, purpose, and so many things. There's always a decision between the two, fear and freedom. Now, every decision you make will be between the two. Where is it taking you? Excuse me.
I really resonate with the feelings that the example of the client that you just gave as well, because there's so many moments where I wasn't giving myself permission, and I could see in him, I'm not maybe quite as analytical, but the need for perfection. Like, I'm not there yet. And I still feel times where I'm just like, I'm not there yet. I'm not ready, but I'm recognizing now, especially after coaching with you, that I won't necessarily feel that. Like, I'll have this calling and the urge of the calling. I just need to take that step forward. And a lot of my urgency in the past, I just was in this urgent hurry. It was clouding so much of my clarity. And my clarity is where my confidence came. And it's just this like filter effect. But yes, the basis of that fear, my perfectionism, I realize is almost always coming from fear. And so just giving ourselves that permission. But I love that you found this calling essentially on a search for it, but it's like you kind of had been searching for something for a long time. It's not like I'm in search of my purpose 2-3 weeks later, I found it. Like, it's a never ending kind of journey. And even once you've stepped into this journey, it's continued to develop for you, hasn't it? Or
yeah, it actually, as soon as you said that, the search didn't begin where I started the journey. The search literally began. And it's emotional for me because it began as a child. That's why I keep going back to this side of you, whoever is in this space that you're trying to discover. It's already there. It has always been there. You've either forgotten about it or have minimized it or think that this is some kind of new thing. It's not. I remember specific scenarios. My search began when I would hear things about religion. It would like spark something within me about afterlife, religion, mythology, stories. I was so deeply interested, but in the meantime, I would be asking a lot of questions. And even then I realized something was off as a child, because every time I would ask a question, people would get scared. I'm like, what is this fear around me asking questions? Like, you shouldn't be asking a question like that.
Yeah.
And it was, so for me, most of it has been a journey back to that side of me.
Mm-hmm.
And this is really important for people to understand. And I had the good fortune, at least there was one person who didn't respond like everybody else. And the way that looked like was, I would ask a bunch of questions and he would answer whatever he could, and then he will say, I don't know. I don't know. He wouldn't say, sure, don't ask questions. He said, I don't know. And that was like, oh. And that's my dad, by the way.
Yeah.
Everybody else, whenever I would ask him questions, even though he was the one who was actually, in a sense, that he was a religious teacher. Mm-hmm. And that even put more credibility towards him, because he studies this stuff and yet he says, I don't know. So that gave me the thing, oh, there are things that need to be discovered here. Yet everybody else was afraid to even answer the question or entertain the thought. That sparked me to continue on, even though there was a lot of it I blocked, but that helped me look for that even at a deeper level. Had I not had that, I don't know if I'd be here. Mm-hmm. So, and this is for adults or whoever is around, when kids are seeking, they're questioning, just know that as an adult, you don't know everything, most things. You know certain things. And this has become a much better process now than it was when I was growing up, because then the culture that I was growing up was very rigid. Mm-hmm. So, and that's the power of influence, is that all it takes is one person, sometimes one connection that could give you the inspiration or the permission to keep going. But it also, and that's why I said that it starts from that childhood, but we put a pause on it because we either feel attacked based on how we approached it, or feel like we need to defend. We are a social species. Within every group that we're a part of, we need to feel accepted. So if we feel rejected, that's equivalent in our biology to dying, because if we get outcasted, what happens? That's why people, and there are lots of jokes around this, but most people are afraid of public speaking than they are of dying sometimes, because the public speaking actually leads to dying. If you feel rejected by the people around you.
I have to pause for a second. I think that the power of saying, I don't know, as an educator, as a leader, as a parent, as a friend, like, I think that is so has become not necessarily acceptable in our society. Maybe it's like the way we're taught in school, especially in the Western culture. You always have to have an answer for everything. It feels like when someone asks you or says something, it's like you just have to have an answer. And sometimes when we force that answer, it's inauthentic. It's just coming from regurgitating something someone else said. Like, it doesn't come from intuition. But to truly just sit, and even as a spiritual leader, to say, I don't know, is so, it's permission giving for other people to not have to have all the answers all the time. And it would help, I see how it can help people to go search for their own answers, because truly that's where the beauty is, us finding our own truths, this own journey. There's not necessarily like this one truth within our spirituality, within our purpose in life, within all these things. And I think that working with you as a coach was one of those experiences for me, because you were able to read the things that came across for me. I could get only so far with the courses, the books, the practices, the YouTube videos. Like, I only got so far, but I needed someone to read me, challenge me, ask me those questions. And it wasn't in like a leading way, but it was in an opening up way where I saw these other potentials. And when we did that, it was, I could see where things were coming from, where my perfectionism was coming from as a childhood, where my my identity, my value was found in that, and maybe how that was triggered where I couldn't have seen that before. And then there were times where I couldn't necessarily find the root, but it didn't matter. The fact that I was aware of this helped me able to just move forward with it. But the one of the first things we did was we built that vision for me together. And it really helped me just see, like, what is it that I want out of all these things that I'm working so hard for? But in doing that, I saw the potential of the person that I am and can become if I just continue this journey. It's not a straight road. There are just small little steps and alignments, and the missteps are steps. Like, it's a web. It's a really beautiful web. But I want to touch back a little bit on like this identity piece that I think all of this surrounds. I just kind of heard this theme of like this personal identity through the journey come through this. And when we did my building the vision exercise, which I saved and clipped and put the recording on my phone so I could listen to it, it helped me encounter and get over that fear of so many things. I listened to it the day before I did my first photo shoot where I was so uncomfortable. And it just helped me like release that fear. It was still there, but release it to where it wasn't overriding me physically. Like all of those biochemicals, like I wasn't overridden by that. It was there, but I was able to continually move forward. But how do you see this, like building your vision piece within the journey, within the identity?
So I tend to look at so identity in the sense identity is an aspect of vision. And just to clarify what vision is, and this is the part that I try to do in my trainings and the 5 video series that you helped me create, Monica, which I'm grateful for, which is already, it's not out yet.
Yep.
I'm working on that in the background. Why is vision important? And this is not like a new thing that I created or anybody created in modern times, as much as people want to take credit for this. This has been with us for hundreds of thousands of years. In fact, this comes out of the human experience. You can go as far back as, let's say, one of the oldest cultures who thought about this was probably the Indian culture. Who have this concept in their culture and in their literature, in their mythology around, and they call it Maya. And they literally, in Maya is illusion. Like they say that the world is an illusion. And it's almost in every culture subsequently. It's the same idea that's been passed around. It's in Aboriginal cultures, it's even in the monotheistic religions, that this world is just an illusion. It's temporary. It's going to pass on. The real world is after this, but they have a sequentially linear aspect to this. But what Indians talk about is, I think, much closer to the truth, in the sense that when they say the world is an illusion, and by the way, this is being more and more verified by scientists who are creating theories around, and the closest theory that they've come to that is much more likely than anything else, that the world is an artificial reality that we live in. And they have all sorts of hypotheses around it. Like it could be that us from the future have created this for us to keep creating this, or it could be that it was created by another organism or something else. But what Indians knew was, or understood, or came to conclusion was that the world is not as real as it seems. It's an illusion. It's fabricated by our consciousness. And so what do we do with this? We have to differentiate between what kind of experiences are real and what kinds are not, and what we create in our mind. And they created their own world in a sense. If you look at their mythology and stories, they have this very fantastical story of gods and goddesses and everything. And maybe that was part of their experience at some point. We don't know. But essentially what they're saying is that, and I'm extrapolating that now, is that if that applies to the human culture, civilization, and us as a collective, is the same thing for the microcosm of every person, then your world is an illusion. Mm-hmm. It's made up. So what do you want to make up? If it's the kind of world that's not static, if it's the kind of world that's not fixed, then it's dynamic by nature, and it changes with input. It changes with what you give it. And where does the input come from? So this is where I don't knows come in. I don't know the scientific base as much as people claim all sorts of things like law of attraction and everything else, and there's basis in it. We don't know any of that stuff. We don't know if there's some kind of heaven afterwards or not. If we don't know if that's even real, because from Buddhist perspective, heaven and hell is within you. Like if you look at it from that perspective. So we don't know the physically how this show up, scientifically how this show up in our life, but in experience, this is provable, because all you have to do is try it and see what happens. And human experience is just as real as some kind of scientific data. It's actually much more real because you experience your reality. So, and let me take you back. So you already have a vision. Everybody has a vision, whether you, and then it goes back to that Maya piece, is that, and the problem is that your vision was created by your culture, by the people around you. It was fed to you from the moment you came into this life to the moment that you, quote unquote, became an adult. What does that vision look like? Hey, your name is Monica. Hey, you are like this kind of girl. You like these kind of things. Oh, I can see that you're a great artist. I can see that. So you get feedback from your environment, and what happens is the things that you get great feedback on, they get amplified. The things that you get pain around, they get suppressed. And there's wisdom in there, because human beings need to adapt quickly to their environment. As by Dr. Noah Harari, who talks about this, is that human children are like molten glass in his book Sapiens, which means we can be shaped in all sorts of ways. That's why we can be in any culture, and we be trained to think in any way, and we'll be just fine. We create a model around that way of looking at things. We think that's true. That's why I was sharing, like when I came from that culture to this, my model of how I looked at the world was very different than here. It didn't fit into this world. I had to switch that for it to make sense. So you grew up, you had to adapt, and here's the difference between humans and animals as far as we understand it, and there's probably a lot of vacuum in there too, because we don't understand everything about animals, is that a human child gets adapted pretty quickly to a culture, and that allows them the ability to survive within the culture and thrive within that specific group, versus a horse needs some specific biological things for them to function. Like you can't have a horse be in different cultures. Like that doesn't exist. A horse is a horse anywhere. Human beings can be very different in Western world versus somewhere in Africa. Like think of the Bushman tribe versus somebody living in North America. Somebody from North America right now, if they go there, they will die. I will die there.
Me too.
Within a few hours.
Yes.
If I'm not protected by the tribe there. Like there's no, and there's, if you haven't watched this movie, When the Gods Must Be Crazy, please watch it. It's one of the funniest movies. Like human beings will take water tankers there to survive for a few weeks and run back out. But these guys have evolved and adapted to that world, that they know exactly how to do what to do in that culture. We don't. We can be in separate different worlds with different rituals, different cultures, so many ways to adapt, and that's what makes us humans. So that means that your vision of the world was given to you, and when you became an adult, you didn't realize, because you were never taught, that whatever was given to you was made up by your culture, and there were positive aspects of it, there were negative aspects of it. Had you lived in a culture where the whole world was like that, and the world was so big that you never encountered other cultures, then that's your reality. That's your vision for the world, and you live that out. You'll be happy with that. You'll be connected. Your purpose will be associated with that. Great, you move on. The modern world is not that world anymore. Now you have different visions intersecting most of them don't make sense with each other, and that's why we're trying to find common grounds around these visions. So then you living in the world right now, you come to a point where you're an adult. I'll give it in the words of Alan Watts. You get to a point where you're 40, 50 or whatever, and you were given this vision of a life of, I'm gonna get my job, my career, my family, house, everything. You get there and you sit there one day, it's like, man, I'm finally here. I've been working on this all my life. You look back with a certain sense of feeling cheated. This is it. This is it. This is what was my the problem. So here's the thing. You bought into a vision that wasn't necessarily yours. And for most people that'd be great. But what we're learning and seeing through data and polls and stuff, that people are not happy anymore, because it's become this vision of consumerism. It's not a vision of how it used to be with human beings, because if you were part of a tribe, there wasn't just consumption, there was connection, there was purpose, there was fulfillment, within the community that you were in. What the hell do I do now? I'm becoming more and more miserable. As you described, I'm trying to rush from one thing to the next thing to feel like I'm doing something productive. Mm-hmm. And then it just keeps leading towards disconnection, lack of purpose, lack of all sorts of things. And then that's where we met. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to throw this back to you. Like, what changed when you went through the vision? Like, what was different between the way you were looking at it and the way you looked at it after?
My definition of success, essentially, I knew, like internally, I knew, but I didn't fully understand what it was that I was seeking. I was seeking again, which I knew, but I was still pursuing it. I knew that the external things didn't create the internal feelings and experience and purpose that I wanted for my life. And yet I didn't know any other way. And I just kept following that path of pursuing those things at the same time. And then trying in the background, reading the spirituality books, doing the meditations, doing all the practices. And then I just hit this junction where I just quit all of those things that I was trying to do. It wasn't working. I lost that drive, and it just wasn't working for me anymore. And I had a more deep connection with what I wanted to build, but I also felt more disconnected at the same time. Very confusing feeling. But again, it's because how I was going towards what identity I was seeking within myself, I guess. I don't know, like I was disconnected from the identity of who I truly was, and I didn't fully understand it. I just knew. And when I went through the vision, I could truly feel what that would feel like. And it took away all the external pressures of the things that I felt like I had to achieve first to get that. But in doing that, it opened up my ability to pursue and achieve those things. Am I making sense? Like,
yeah. So, and
this is very hard to describe
because it's very experiential, right?
Yes.
It's so hard to describe, and I'll try to paint that picture. So, think back to the child who already had an identity. If you talk to any parents, and if you've seen any children, no two children are the same. They come into this world, like my two daughters, without us even saying anything to them from the time they were born. The way they looked, the way they saw the world, the way their bodies moved, very different. World of even twins, we know that they're completely, I've had identical twins in my family, like they're so different from each other. And so you have an identity. And so when you come into a culture, the culture, it does any culture will give you a variation of positive and negative through your parents, media, literature, religion, all sorts of other things, national values and all that stuff. So you'll get a mix of the two. So it either amplifies that identity, supports it to grow. And this is my assumption, by the way. So I'm going to say that my assumption is that either amplifies that identity or it molds it to shape that culture. Now, obviously, this is a very rudimentary way of explaining it, because there will be a mixture of the two, because we still have to adapt to the culture. But the molding part, if it becomes too extreme, then you lose your original identity. You have to adapt to the culture and appear like you're accepted.
And the culture for me, in my experience, was even the small group of friends, of people I hung out with within my tiny high school in the tiny town. I had this smaller bubble, but I had the full, huge external Western world. But then I had my small group of friends where I was the artist, kind of the messy one, trying to do these like AP US history and science classes and mathematics, trying to keep up with those friends too. So it can be a huge influence and even a small influence.
There's some percentage of people that won't understand the ways the culture is. Now, I have my theories around that. One of my theories is that they serve a specific role in the evolution of human beings. Now, that doesn't mean they're smarter or better than the rest of the population. That means they have a specific role, and most people around them are not recognizing that role. A lot of the older cultures, they recognize it. For example, if you go to the Eastern world, they understand the value of people who are who are not consumers of society, who literally are homeless. They will come and they will give them food. This is a very common thing in India, Afghanistan, and those kind of places. They will come to ask for food, but they're not homeless in the sense that people are here. They're like they're called yogis, in the sense that meaning has changed to they're seeking something. They're seekers. What they're seeking, nobody actually understands, but they know that they hold a key to the puzzle of human experience. So they respect them more than any. They respect the homeless more than the people who have homes. So ancient people, they saw the value of these people. But in modern times, we've kind of standardized success. We've standardized happiness. We've standardized all these things. So most of the people that I connect to, they are those kind of people that didn't quite fully adapt to the environment, including myself. So I see that where they didn't adapt, because I went through that whole pain. So and this is why whenever I connect with you or anybody like you, they feel more at home with me than they probably do with anybody around them, because I see you. I see who you are, because I see myself in you. So as soon as you, and this is what happened when you talked about the identity, all I did was ask some questions around, what do you actually want? What are the desires that you've been putting on hold because people might have told you it's not possible. People might have told you that you shouldn't be like this. People might have told you, or you might have observed that this, and a lot of this is subconscious. So as you build the vision, it starts with what I desire, which is not this very surface thing. But within that desire, that's what brings the adventure. It's like somebody sitting at home and saying, I love those mountains. I wish I could go to the top. That's the desire, right? It's connected to a part of them that's getting them to want to go to on top of the one that they don't know why. It's not the mountaintop that's important. It's the adventure that begins when you look at the mountaintop and you're like, that's what I want to do. And you accept that. Now you're going to have to become the kind of person who climbs that mountain. That means you're going to have to develop the ability to the stamina to walk towards it. You have to develop the strength to deal with any hardships on the way. You have to develop the collaboration with other people around you that will support you to go there. You develop all sorts of aspects of yourself, and the more you develop, the more it kind of brings out that identity that you never acknowledged from the past. And you start to notice, holy shoot, maybe I was not the person I was told I was. The desire is not, now this is the key. The desire is not the important thing. It's the beginning of something. And then the adventure helps you build the identity. So now I'm in the beginning stages too, just like everybody else. And that's what it feels like for me. And every step of the way, an aspect of that identity that I had left behind reveals itself. And this is how I'm looking at it. It might be very different in reality, or maybe there's a different way of looking at it. So as you build this identity and as you expand on it, it's an ever expansive identity, you start to feel like, oh, what is this identity? It's not like the Monica I was told I was, because it's ever changing, it's dynamic in nature, and it's ever expanding. And I can't put my fingers, I can't put it in a box. So what is it? Well, the best analogy or the best thing that I can come up with is nature. Try putting nature in a box. We do that, it doesn't work. Nothing in nature fits into a box. We can try to understand it in all sorts of different, but it's ever expanding, ever evolving. There are so many aspects of it, from a cell to a bigger organism, that we don't actually understand. And we have come to the conclusion that nature is ever expanding and evolving, ever shifting. We are an aspect of that same nature, but we were taught to live within that box to survive. But are we still there? And are you the kind of person that feels aligned with that box? If you do, that's great. If you don't, then there's a whole adventure waiting for you. And you develop this identity as you move forward on this adventure. And essentially, that's what a vision is. You go for the desire that you want, that's connected to your heart, not based on what other people told you. And along the way, you build this identity, or you connect back to an identity that you had every step of the way. And it feels like, oh, you're finally going back to something. You feel comfortable in your skin, and now you feel connected to a part of yourself, or you feel connected to yourself. You feel connected to other people around you. All of a sudden, the external environment is not a negative environment. There's an alignment between the internal and external, because now the vision is your vision. It might be an illusion, but it's a beautiful illusion that you're creating, and you have the ability to do that. Yeah. And I might have made it worse, but this is how I look at it.
No, it's definitely, the illusion is choice. And I think there's so many people, especially when I run into my clients, where they feel like they're stuck in that identity. And also that before they take that journey to the vision, before they even start that adventure of climbing the mountain, that they have to have everything figured out first, or everything done. But as we are an ever evolving human, it can never be done. And there are things that need to be on the path of the journey for them to come to fruition. The connections that need to be made, the personal development, the realizations, everything of that needs to happen on the journey. So with the vision drawing you forward to start along the path, everything else can come in its divine timing, without us needing to force it, to schedule it, we just need to be there and be present with the tools that we have, and maybe even find better tools as we go along, as we have need. But it's like this hoarding collection of, I have to have everything figured out, I have to have the map. I was very much that way, even in planning like a road trip or a weekend snowboarding. Now that's fine for a weekend up in the mountains, but for life, that doesn't work. You're gonna sit at home planning without building the vision and actually moving towards it. So I think that's one of the most amazing, there's so many. That's one of the very first amazing things about working with you, about being in the group coaching sessions and everything as well. So in order to build a vision, you do a free coaching, and people can find that and sign up for that. We'll just say your website address, FaisalEnsaun.com. You can find that, and going to soon be released the 5 video series as well. You can sign up and access those immediately once they go live. And as with all things with Faisal, you get way more than you expected in a great way. And he's agreed to do a second session with us about authenticity and more about this culture programming. So join us again in the next episode for more, and we'll see you there. My name is Monica Fawn. I'm an artist and marketing assistant turned brand Sherpa and website designer. I help people just like you and me be on fire and sustainably profitable, to be on brand, incomparable in your industry with a personal brand, and on purpose, walking your path of fulfillment. And last and not least, be authentic, living a life true to yourself and free.